Good morning, everyone. This is Ben Dunn, founder of Anarchic Press, a comic book publishing company founded in 1985. Creator of such comics as Ninja High School, Marvel Mangaverse, Warrior Nun, Mighty Tiny, Tomorrow Girl, Penguina, and a host of other comic book characters. So, I listen to a lot of comic book channels, and there's quite a few of them that talk about buying, selling, speculating on comic books. And I asked myself, are comic books really a good investment? There's a scene in the movie The Accountant where the main character, is pulling out a bunch of assets that he has, and among them were some rather significant Golden Age comics. I think there was an Action Number 1 in there, maybe a Detective 27, an All-American comic with the first appearance of Green Lantern. I'm not sure exactly what was in there, but it were quite a few significant Golden Age key issues that are actually worth a lot of money. So why would he have that? Why would he have a bunch of valuable comics in an area where he had, cash, original art? I'm not talking about really valuable pieces of artwork from, masters of the craft. And it got me thinking about, my collecting over the last 50 years or so. And I will admit, I'm an avid comic book collector. I love collecting comics because I love comics. You have to understand that what exactly is an investment? Well, an investment is when you buy something, and by the way, this is my definition of it, so you may look it up if you want to and, disagree or disagree with it. But the general idea of an investment is buying something in the hopes that you will get a return, hopefully a high return, off your initial investment. Doesn't always work out that way, of course, because life is full of surprises and unpredictability. The thing about comics is that comics were never meant to be investments. When comics were created, they were originally disposable entertainment. They were priced at a very low price in order it to be an impulse buy. They were meant primarily for children, for kids, for younger readers, so to speak. They would be placed at an eye level of a child, a kid. And they usually had a lot of bright colors, showed a lot of action, showed a lot of circumstances that would be interested to kids. Now, somewhere along the line, these kids started growing up and they had nostalgic feelings of the comics that they read growing up. They longed for the days of those where they were entertained by these comic books. And then someone got the bright idea to want to buy back issues. Now you have to understand, like I said, comics were disposable income. No one ever in their mind thought that comic books would be worth anything. They were quickly thrown away. They were manhandled. They were shared among peers, left out in the yard, stuffed underneath the bed, folded in the back pocket. They were, and then during the drive of World War II, paper drives of World War II, countless huge stacks of millions of comics were recycled and pulped. So not very many survived the war years. So thus, they became extremely rare. At least a lot of the key issues are. Now, where am I getting? Well, somebody put an ad in a comic book saying they're looking for back issues and specific issues for that matter. And they were paying way above cover price. The thing about comics back in those days, like the 40s, 50s, even in the 60s, most back issues, there were no comic book shops back then. Most back issues ended up in used bookstores. They'd have their section of comics. They would usually price them like 1, 2 cents, 5 cents, 10 cents, or whatever they thought they could get away with. Because they were trash, basically. The comic book stores never treated them seriously. They would throw them in a cardboard box, right on the cover, say 5 cents, 3 cents, whatever they think they could get away with it. But then somebody wanted to buy back issues and put an ad in a comic book saying, I will pay, $10 for this comic, like an Action Comics #1. And back then, that was a lot of money, especially for a comic book. Nobody thought in their right mind to pay any more than retail for a comic book. And then more and more collectors started to appear on the scene, wanting to buy back issues and paying, way above what people are used to as far as comic books were concerned. And this led to a burgeoning back issue collector's market, where they would actually want to buy, old issues of comic books and were willing to pay way above the cover price. When most people weren't used to that. They just never experienced anything like that before. And then the race began to start collecting these old comic books. And some the prices started to slowly creep up, and people were starting to look for these books as a means to make money off of them. Now, the big change happened when the first Overstreet price guide came out. When the first Overstreet price guide came out, that standardized what comic books were worth. Now people could actually look up what a comic book is worth, And how do they determine that? Who makes the decision as to what a comic book is worth? How do they determine that? Well, according to the price guide itself, it's a conglomerate of collectors, in comic book retailers, and they determine the price. They talked amongst themselves saying, well, we think this comic's worth this because I'm willing to pay this much for that. And that's how it all started. They didn't just make up these prices, but maybe they did. Maybe they made up these prices so that they could get people to look for them and so they could buy them. I mean, think about that for a minute. Let's say you have an Action #1 back in the 60s and 70s. Let's just say you had Action #1. And it's been in your father's collection for many, many years, and he recently passed away. Now you inherited an Action #1. And then you see some guy, put an ad and say, I will buy your Action #1 for $100. $100? That's a lot of money back then, especially for a comic book that says it's only worth 10 cents. So they would buy as many of these comics as they possibly can, and then once they were off the market, or they, had a vast majority of them, now it's worth $1,000. Now it's worth $10,000. Now it's, they keep upping the price because the rarity of that particular book becomes more and more scarce. I mean, the availability of that comic book becomes more and more scarce. Now, this started the trend of people starting to buy comics to resell, to speculate on, to see if they can hold it as an investment. Now, what exactly is a comic book? It's supposed to entertain. You're supposed to read it. That's the same as like, you're buying a car with no intention of driving it. There's a lot of things. Now, another hobby that was very popular, that's sort of fallen out of favor, is stamp collecting. I don't know, many of you, maybe among people, probably don't realize this, but stamp collecting was the thing. People, it was a huge hobby. A lot of people stamp collected, and some stamps were worth millions of dollars. I'm not sure how much people collect stamps nowadays, but you very rarely hear about people collecting stamps. Stamps are just not in vogue. Oh yeah, there's still collectors out there, I'm sure, and there's still valuable stamps out there, I'm sure. But it's just one of those things that people just no longer collect as much anymore. I don't know what the values of stamps are, but very rarely do I hear. And then it's really not a hobby that I'm into, but stamp collecting was a thing. So, are comic books good investments? Well, I've had this discussion with many people, especially my brother, who's also a comic book collector. We're both comic book collectors. But we love it because we like to read them. We like to hold them. We like to touch them. We like to smell them. We love the history, the patina, of a comic book. We love to be able to think about who owned this comic book. What circumstances led for me to own this book? What series of events caused someone to pick up this 12-cent comic and the journey it made from that newsstand to my collection? I often wondered about that sometimes. How many hands did it go through to finally end up in mine? But see, that's because I love reading comics, and I use the word read because that's what I do. I love reading comics. I look at them, I study the pictures, I read the story, I into the characters and things like that. Comic collecting is a hobby. And the thing about it is that as any hobby, it's meant for a specific thing. Comics are meant to be read, and you're supposed to enjoy the stories and the character and the art. If you buy a comic book for investment, then I think you may be in for a surprise. You see, comic books are not real investments. Not in the same way as stocks are, bonds are, mutual funds, precious metals, gems, cash. The liquidity of comics is only as if you can find a buyer for it. And that's the thing about it, is that when you are in a hobby with a certain amount of collectors, there's only a certain number of people who are willing to pay a certain amount of money for a certain comic. A vast majority of people, they don't care about comics. They only see dollars. When there's a news story about Action Number 1 selling for like $2 or $3 million, people say, "Oh, an Action Comics number 1 sold for $3 million, then comics must be valuable." No, that Action Comics number 1 is valuable. And what are the chances of anybody outside a select group of people ever owning an Action Comics number 1? It's just not the same as real investments that have liquidity. Even cryptocurrency has more liquidity than comics. The thing about it is that cryptocurrency is digital. It's not real. It's only real in the sense that we make it real. It's numbers, electronic beeps, electricity. You can't hold electricity. The thing about it is that we only give it value because that's what we've decided. We decided as people to give it value. That means I accept your cryptocurrency as, cash. That I would exchange your crypto for something solid and physical. Yeah. But if we stop believing in crypto, if people start ignoring it and stop using it, then it becomes worthless. Yeah. The thing about it is that comics, are far beyond what it was intended to be. Yeah. If you look at the long-term investment value of comics, it's a very poor investment if you really want the truth. More often than not, a lot of these comic book investment channels, and I use the term loosely, they're trying to get you to buy comics as a solid investment. Now, I'm not a trader, and I don't really know what entails. I'm not going to tell you, whether or not comics are a good investment or not. I'm just telling you my opinion about what it is that I believe is the reality of comic book investments. As I said before, I love comics. I collect comics because I want to have them in my collection. I collect specific comics because I enjoy reading them and having them. If they happen to go up in value, well, that's a bonus. That means my choice in that particular comic was a wise one. But let's face it, 99% of a comic book collection is worth next to nothing. It's very rare if a comic book actually holds its cover price value. We are willing to pay whatever we're willing to pay for a particular comic book. If a comic book if the price is too high, then we won't buy it. And if enough people don't buy it and the holder can't sell it, he's going to have to lower the price if he wants to sell it. As for me, I don't care. My collection is there for me to enjoy. If I need money, I can usually sell it. It's probably would be at a loss, but because I have to find a buyer, and I have to negotiate with that buyer. The buyer is there to get it as cheaply as possible. Most buyers of comics, they will not pay you the so-called price guide value of it. They now look it up on eBay. In fact, if you go to try to buy or sell comics, inevitably, more often than not, in 99% of the cases, they're going to look it up on, guess what? On eBay. And they're going to see what those comics are going to be worth, or at least what's selling for. Now, it's a fact that you can ask whatever you want for a comic book, or for anything for that matter. The trick is whether you can convince someone to buy it. Sometimes I'll see listings on eBay of a comic book, and it's outrageously expensive, but they don't care. The person who's selling it is probably holding on to it in the hopes that he can convince somebody to pay his asking price. If it just depends how desperately he needs money. The thing about stocks, bonds, mutual funds, things like that, they have instant liquidity. You can sell those things almost immediately and get cash. Because that's what it comes down to, is whether or not you can get cash for your investment. Because cash is what is universally accepted by people. What is cash anyway? Cash is just paper. Paper with numbers, some funny pictures of dead presidents on them, with some nice, pretty colors. The only reason it has value is because we give it value. We as a society, have accepted cash as a means of exchange of goods and services. People think that, just print more cash. No, that's not how it works. Cash is only as valuable because it's scarce. We give it value because we trust that it has that value. If you just start overprinting the cash, then it loses its value. It doesn't have as much purchasing power because there's more of it in circulation. The reason that cash has value is because it's scarce. It's supposed to be scarce. If it wasn't scarce, then it would be worthless. Same with comics. If there are too many comics of a particular thing, it has to exceed the demand has to exceed the supply for it to become valuable. And in most cases, comic books are not. There isn't enough demand, to exceed the supply of most comic books. So if you happen to have an Action Comics #1, good for you. Kudos. You have a very valuable comic book. I'm sure somebody will pay you quite a bit for it. And of course, it's just determined by condition, things like that, because condition is everything in this hobby. The nicer the comic book, the more valuable it is. But what are your chances of actually obtaining an Action #1 or finding an Action? I mean, I'm sure there's still some of them out there that have been undiscovered. People are finding them, not all the time, but they do pop up on occasion. But as investments, I wouldn't retire on it if you really want the truth. You're better off taking that money you would have spent, on a comic book and putting it in the stock market, a mutual fund, retirement fund. You're in a bond, or in precious metals. You're much better off. Your return in a CD is much better than most comic books. If you were to put, if you were to take $1,000 you would have spent on a comic book and bought Google stock when it first came out, you'd be a millionaire. And you can buy all the comic books you want. You see, my brother once told me that very few people get rich buying and selling comics. If you think about it for a minute, how many comic book dealers are multimillionaires? Very few. I would probably say I can count probably on, one hand, people who became millionaires buying and selling comics. Very few people. There's a lot of people who became rich doing other things who collect comics. They're the ones that they've made their fortune in other areas other than comic books. And that's how they're able to buy all the comic books they want. And I just want to say that if you're thinking about retiring on speculating and buying comics, I would probably advise against it. It's probably a very poor investment. But if you're buying comics to enjoy, to read, to be part of, to escape to, comics books are the best value you can get. Because that's what it's meant to be. It's meant to transport the reader into a world, into a fantasy land, to engage with characters, that may change your life. That's what they're meant to be. That's what they're supposed to be. They're not, liquid investments. They're a form of entertainment. And that's what they've always been. we should stop treating comics as investments and start treating them as entertainment. We need to focus on content and not variant covers, how rare it is, the ratio, all that kind of stuff. Him and Holly about, oh, you should get this comic because it's going to be hot, hot, hot. It's like, yeah, 6 months later, it's cold, cold, cold. The thing about it is that it's a very select, small group of people who are willing to pay large sums of money, for a comic book. Yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to poo-poo our industry. I mean, I'm trying to poo-poo our hobby as a means of making money off of it. No, I'm not trying to do that at all. But I am saying that you would be better off, investing a lot of that money into real investments, making your fortune that way, and buying all the comic books you want. If you have a lot of money already, you can buy as many comics as you want, and people are willing to sell them to you. I mean, then you've accomplished two things at once. But anyway, I've ragged on long enough. I'm not, like I said, disparaging any comic book retailers or investors or anything out there who are wanting to do comics. But I tell you, the reality of it is that comic books are not what you think they are. And I think that if you're trying to buy and flip comics, just simply for the sake of making money, I think they're a rather poor investment. But that's just my opinion. What do I know? I'm just some old guy, probably shouting at the clouds. But you can take it for what it's worth, But that's just my opinion. So anyway, here's my obligatory shill of the day. I do have a campaign going on Kickstarter. It's called CRIMSON NUN. It's written by Ron Fortier, who was the writer of such comics as The Incredible Hulk, Green Lantern, Green Hornet, and The Terminator, and other fine comic books drawn by Jesse Thomas, a very talented artist, and created by me. So hopefully you'll check it out. Link is below. If you like it, please back it. And if you have enjoyed what you've just heard, please like and subscribe. Until next time, this has been Dunn signing off.